Welcome, innovators and inventors, dreamers and doers. This is the final master lecture of Phase 1 of the GoFly Prize competition. My name is Jenna McMullen. I'm with Technology Communications for the Boeing Company, and I'm thrilled to be here with a studio audience of Boeing employees. There's a lot of electricity here in Seattle as we get excited for our discussion today. Boeing is proud to serve as the grand sponsor of the GoFly Prize competition, and as the conclusion of Phase 1 nears, we're all getting excited and are very curious about the ideas and the creations that all the GoFly participants around the world are coming up with. So with that, let's think about GoFly by the numbers. So far, about 2,400 innovators across 650 teams. That's 90 countries represented across Europe, Asia, Africa, North and South America, and Australia. Antarctica, there is still time because Phase 1 concludes on April 18th. So with that as a backdrop, let's jump right into this master lecture. We're going to do things a little differently and have an interactive discussion today that also includes questions from you, the GoFly participants. Our special guest today is a true statesman of aerospace. He is an innovation advocate and a champion for the creativity of people. I am so excited to welcome Greg Hyslop, the Chief Technology Officer of Boeing. Welcome,
Thanks,
Greg.
Jen. Thank you.
Glad you could be here. Yeah, so with all those numbers we heard about, there's been great interest in GoFly, and pardon the pun, but it's really taking off.
No, it's really surprised all of us how just the breadth and numbers of the interest in this, but it's really cool to see, and I think it just points to the broad interest in aerospace. I've often said I think we're on the verge of entering another golden era of aerospace as transportation is going to change. And I think this is just evidence of that. And I think you also see the fact that a number of technologies are coming together that are be able to implement some of these ideas more accessible. So it's going to be very exciting to see how it all plays out.
Oh, very much so. And we know there's $2 million in prize money, but there's more at stake here.
That's
so
right.
Help us understand why Boeing is involved.
Well, we've always led in aerospace. When you look at the history of aerospace is really the history of Boeing. And we've always been a leader in that. Innovation has always fueled aerospace, and frankly, competition has always fueled aerospace. And so having this kind of competition about a very difficult problem is right in the sweet spot of how the industry has evolved and how our company has evolved. So it was intriguing to us from that standpoint. But then, our mission is, we always say our mission at Boeing is to connect, protect, explore, and inspire. And we really see this right in line with that mission, because taking transportation down to the individual level and using the Z-axis, if you will, to free up our transportation personally, is going to be one of those things that allows people to connect. It's a story about empowerment, and I think it's just going to be very interesting to see the ideas that emerge from this. So from that standpoint, to connect and to explore new ideas and to inspire people, we see GoFly is right in the sweet spot of what our mission is as a company.
That's terrific. And with Boeing being an aerospace company, we're also seeing modes and really the convergence of transportation, air, ground, et cetera. So what are your thoughts on the timing for this? I mean, this moment in history for this next golden era?
What we see happening is a convergence of societal forces and technology. And I think that's what's going to change transportation. The societal forces is that, we've got more and more urbanization. We've got a creaking terrestrial infrastructure. And so how can that keep up with the demands of moving people and moving goods to where we need them to go? The other aspect of this is the technological convergence, because now we're at the point with advances in electric and hybrid electric propulsion, vertical takeoff and landing technologies, with autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, and you really look no further than your cell phone, how we're all connected to each other now, and how we use that to do so much and organize so much of our daily lives, including our transportation, that the convergence of these things, I think, makes it right for a competition like GoFly. Now, the challenge we'll have is that if it was just a matter of picking the right technologies or gadgets off the shelf and I've got to bolt them together and voila, I'll have the GoFly prize, it's not that easy. And that's why this is a very challenging set of criteria that we've asked people to meet. It's a very challenging problem. And that's why it's going to be interesting to see from innovators around the world how they would approach this problem, because they're very demanding criteria. And I think the other aspect of this is, and have it be safe. And that's going to be very important.
And I think you hit on something key there. This really is about safe personal flight. And you highlighted a couple of the challenges there. But what else do you see as being unique to something like GoFly? And what should our participants think about in terms of resource and skills as they pull together their ideas?
The interesting thing about aerospace is it's not the purview of aerodynamicists. It's going to be all kinds of experts have to come together. I always tell whenever I show up at an engineering college, I always say, I don't know if I really care what your major is. I'm sure we can use you, regardless, because the problems are that complex. So really, it's going to take people from all kinds of backgrounds. I mean, if you're an artificial intelligence person, if you're a propulsion person, if you are an aero person, all of these disciplines are going to be brought together to have a system that will meet these criteria. For us in the Boeing company, when we talk about autonomous vehicles flying and things like that, we always say, though, safety is always going to be the most important thing. So having designs here that where we look for safety and reliability those are going to be paramount criteria. When our judges will look at the designs, is that going to be safe? Is it going to be reliable? And those are going to be key things we want the designers to think about.
I want to hit on something you mentioned about the variety of backgrounds. That maybe it's not necessarily solely engineering, the variety of problem solving. As the teams pull themselves together, how would you describe that diversity of thought that might make up a good team?
Well, for the winning team, hopefully they got somebody with an MBA on it, because they're going to need to figure out a business model for this. So, because the business models are going to change as well. I don't know where, I don't think we can imagine if somebody comes up or teams come up with successful designs here, where that might go. What's it mean in a sharing economy? What's it going to mean for, in an urban setting? What's it going to mean? There's all kinds of use cases that could come out of this. So, I would encourage the teams to have a diversity of thought, and if you think you're going to win, be thinking about what that business is going to look like on the other side.
Having that complete picture.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Well, as many of these participants are building that picture, we've heard that they're surveying industry advances, and gosh, you read the news, we hear about new sense and avoidance technology, cars that can drive and park themselves. Yep. You mentioned electric propulsion and other sources of energy. How do you think the developments in air and ground travel will coexist in the future? So maybe it's pulling on partner industries to aviation and aerospace.
Well, I think again, it's hard to imagine fully what the future is going to look like, but I have to believe in the next 10 years or so, we're going to see, we will get past safe autonomous operations, I think. I think we have to understand the limitations of autonomous vehicles from a safety perspective, because I would think there will be limitations. Will we ever, will we be completely away from human operators? No. I mean, we'll always have some level, I believe, because sometimes the consequences will just be too great, and so therefore we'll always need a human in the loop in some cases. Not in all cases, but I think in some cases. And so I can see a world where we'll have terrestrial transportation. But in order to get back my earlier point about the infrastructure needed, I do think we have to start thinking of getting more things in the air in order to reduce the burden on that terrestrial infrastructure. I also believe, today, only 1% of the cargo moved in the world goes through the air, but yet 35% of the value goes through the air. So those things that are the most valuable and time critical are going through the air. That just says there's a lot more room, because I think as people, we end up with more on-demand economies. People are going to want their goods and services sooner, and they're not going to be willing to wait, which says we're going to have to get it to them faster, which means we're going to have to get things up in the air. So I think there's going to be a number of things, and we're going to see multimodal transportation that is going to involve both terrestrial and airborne. But I do believe we're going to see much more in the air than we have today.
And do you think that will take on different nuances based on locations in the world?
Yeah. I mean, for us, why it's important for Boeing to get involved in this is because, we think about things like, how's that going to operate in bad weather? So I think climate and where certain locations are is going to have an impact on the kinds of vehicles that will be able to operate in these, like this. So the regulatory environments will be different. Different cities, different states, different countries have different societal needs and what the problems they need to face for their populations. So each one of those could lead to a family of solutions that's different. So I think the ability to customize solutions for particular settings, customers, governments is going to be very important in the future.
With a mind to the ecosystem that you've described.
Yeah, it's going to require, this future transportation system is going to be complicated. It's going to depend on connectivity, but it has to be done in a way that's going to be safe. That is always going to be paramount. It has to be done in a way that's going to be safe.
Safety equates to reliability and confidence.
Yes, it does.
Very much so.
Yep.
Well, thinking of that and bringing this all together, let's take our GoFly participants into the future.
Okay.
The fly-offs are in 2019.
Right.
So let's say 5 to 10 years after that, what does human flight or cargo transportation or this broader ecosystem look like, and how do you think that the innovations discovered through GoFly are going to play a role?
Yeah, I think flying is going to get more personalized. Is one example. I think it's going to be an alternative to driving and an alternative to trains. I think as in our 787, we've seen for long-range, long-haul flights, how point-to-point works. People don't want to have to connect. They'd like to go from the city they're leaving to the city they want to go to without having an intermediate stop. So imagine point-to-point only at much shorter ranges. And I think that's how this could evolve on demand, where I can get from, I call up on my phone, I want to go from this city to that city, and the whole thing is seamlessly integrated. Something picks me up to take me to where I'll get on an airplane that will fly me to there, and then something else will pick me up to take me to my ultimate location. You can imagine a world like that where there will be different kinds of vehicles at each leg of that journey, where it's customized to that individual. So I think that's going to be the world we live in. And obviously, to get an individual, it's all going to depend. I have to get an individual to a place, and then maybe they'll get on a vehicle with some of their other fellow travelers to go to the next place. But clearly, that individual flying is where what comes out of GoFly could have a significant impact on that. The other thing, Jenna, I always think about, my office is in downtown Chicago, but it's here in Seattle, and every time you walk through down a major urban area and you see the lineup of the rental bicycles, sharing economy, in this case the local government's providing a set of bicycles, and I said, well, in the future when you walk by, are you going to walk by and you're going to see a set of these GoFly devices maybe lined up that you can put your credit card in, use, go to where you need to go, and then park it somewhere else, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It's just interesting to think about what the possibilities might be.
Yeah, the shareability
Yeah.
of personal flight.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to getting to the airport, getting past traffic,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
gives a sense of empowerment to the
Yeah.
user.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Very good. Well, let's pivot, and we've got some great questions submitted by GoFly participants. And our first one comes from a participant in Auckland, New Zealand. This participant asks, what is your criteria for measuring the complexity of a system, especially those involving humans, so that you're aware if you made matters unnecessarily complicated? It sounds like a little bit about how does simplicity figure into this?
Well, I think for people in our business and who design vehicles, simplicity usually equates to reliability. And as I said earlier, safety and reliability are going to be very important lenses by which we'll evaluate designs, as well as the performance. And so I think if the simplicity can lead to a more reliable system, that will be in their favor, designers' favor. So what does simplicity look like? And to one degree, it's in the eye of the beholder. But you know, there's obvious measures we look at, like part count, which is why things like additive manufacturing, and you can, rather than having, you know, assembling a bunch of parts, can I come up with one part that has that capability? With software, it's a little more complex to look at simplicity, but there are ways to evaluate that. So I would just encourage all the designers to you know, it's back to the old adage in aerospace, if it looks good, it'll fly good. And I think it's going to be a similar type situation here. Simplicity will be important if it leads to a more reliable system.
Mm-hmm. What about ongoing maintenance? Doesn't that lend also to the maintenance of these devices?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's a good point, because I mean, typically with things, when they're simpler, they're easier to maintain and repair once they're in the field. So all of those things are important. The more customized things become, it is all those aspects become more difficult. I'd also add, typically systems that are simpler are easier to test. So if I can, you know, take a build-up approach toward testing before I get to the full-up system, and I've got simpler blocks by which I can do that, you've usually got more confidence that when I bring all the pieces together, the system will perform.
And one more follow-on on that. Does metrics figure into this? Should our participants be thinking about simplicity of metrics? We know there's basic criteria for the devices, but as far as performance, even maintainability metrics?
We've got, you know, the performance requirements are out there in the entry criteria for the competition, but you know, it will be important for them to think about how are you going to repair this in the field if something goes wrong. And as I said, when you start thinking toward reliability of a design, be thinking toward more simpler designs, because typically that will lead to a more reliable system.
Very good. Let's take another one, and this one actually relates to you and your career in development. A participant from here in Washington State asks, as an engineer, what sorts of challenges have you faced and how have you handled them? Did you always know that you wanted to join the aerospace industry?
Well, I'll start with the last question. No. My dad was a pilot, but when I went to school, so I'd been fascinated by things that fly, but when I went off to school, I thought I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon. That's what I thought I was going to go do. But I didn't like inorganic chemistry, so I thought I got to change majors, and ended up as a double E. And then kind of found my niche in systems and control. And for people who do systems and control, aerospace is a good place for us to end up. And so that's kind of how I got here. And it's been great. I've had, over my 35 years, I've worked a lot of really hard programs, and a lot of programs where we're trying to do something that has not been done before, and was generally successful in those programs. You know, from putting GPS on things that fly in the early days of GPS, that was my first job. I worked on some classified programs that I can't talk about, but they were really cool.
We'll just trust you on that.
Yeah, and then worked on some missile defense programs that were very difficult but very rewarding. So I think the great thing about, I look over my whole career, was a sense of mission. And this is true in the Boeing company, whether you work on the defense side of the company or the commercial side of the company. There's a clear sense of mission. You know, we want to help the customer complete their mission successfully. And whether that's an airplane at the gate at the airport that's going to take off and take passengers safely to their destination, or one of our military products. That sense of mission is something that I think drives all of us. The sense of doing something that hasn't been done before. I think we all have a little bit of the Wright brothers in us, and Bill Boeing in all of us, that we can build something better. I think that drives a lot of us. And then I think the teamwork. This is the ultimate team sport. And at the Boeing company, we function really well when we function as a team. And it takes all of us, because it's an unnatural act for things to fly. That's not natural for humans. And so to overcome all of those natural forces that are trying to keep us on the ground is a difficult problem. And we take for granted today, because we see things fly all the time, how difficult it is to make an airplane fly, to make a rocket launch. But it's very difficult, and it takes a lot of discipline and disciplines from people that are the best in their fields to make that happen. And that's what gets me up every morning, is getting to work with the people, like people in this room, who are the best in their fields, and completing a mission that is going to change the world, because the products we work on will change the world. And that's really the coolest thing about it.
And a personal flying device could change the world.
It could, yeah, it could change the world. It will change the world if we're successful.
Yeah, I think some of our participants might also be curious in thinking about your career. Was there ever any advice you got that's really stuck with you that they might benefit from?
Gosh, my very first boss, I always remember this, and it'll sound super simple, but it stuck with me. He just said, always know what you're talking about. And so, I do my homework. I be prepared going into any setting, and if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know, and take an action item and move on. But that's always really important, because it does boil down to personal integrity in a lot of this, and that level of honesty that's needed. Making something fly and have a system work. Nature is a stern disciplinarian. She doesn't give us an out on her laws of nature, and so you've got to respect that, and you've got to respect that I've got to have the right answer. And I think particularly for us, because so many people, the lives of people depend on how well we've done our jobs, and so that demands a level of honesty, it demands a level of excellence, it demands a level of preparation. And my first boss just always telling me, always know what you're talking about, just has stayed with me my whole career.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We have one more from a participant in California. And this participant asks, public perception seems to be one of the greatest hurdles when introducing unfamiliar technologies. How can companies like Boeing help the public become more comfortable with new technologies like personal flying devices, electric aircraft, or even the folding wingtips of the new 777?
Well, that's impressive that they point out the folding wingtip on the 777X wing. But these kind of things, our company has a reputation for the public safety, and so that how the public perceives our products is very important to us, and ultimately, that is going to be the determining factor in whether these technologies are accepted, and ultimately will provide value to our customers, and a service that the public wants. Because if it doesn't do that, then it's interesting, but it's not going to go anywhere. It needs to be something that the public will accept, that they value, and that then in turn our customers can provide to them, and so it provides value to our customers, and then so therefore that's what we should be working on. Technology for technology's sake, as I said, is interesting, but it needs to be ultimately technology that provides value to our customers and that the public really needs. So how people see these things is important to us, and that's why I talk about reliability and safety and all these things, because if Boeing is going to be involved with something, we aren't going to compromise our standards around safety and around reliability and these type of things, because those are so important to the public. When they show up at the gate and they want to fly, they want that airplane to work, you know, and they want that airplane to take them safely from their where they're leaving from to their destination, you know, and they're trusting us with that. So it is very important. So you know, around these new technologies, when we talk about them as enabling and providing this empowerment for people, but we also have to, on the same time, talk about safety, reliability, and why those things are so important. Because without those, we won't have the public trust. So we have to be maintaining those high standards all the time.
How does education maybe fit into this? And I'm thinking about points in aviation history
Yeah.
where passenger aircraft were becoming more common, and so there was a bit of an education that was undertaken by companies like Boeing.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a responsibility of ours in this, is to bring the public along with us, and for us to be a thought leader in this, because I think we can speak with a level of authority on some of these subjects that others can't. And because we know how hard it is. And we can look at these new technologies through the experience lens that we have and use that to translate into terms to bring the public thinking along with us. Any new technology will be, needs to, you know, in a sense, buy its way into the thinking and acceptance of the public, and that's not a bad thing, because that enforces discipline, and that enforces a level on these things that it keeps the, you know, kind of the people who'd be less responsible, you know, at bay.
Right.
And so that's why it's important. So I think it's just going to be part of the natural evolution of these, but we do have to lead in that and help educate people, educate our regulatory authorities on these technologies.
Sounds like another key team member for our GoFly participant teams.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, with that, I'd like to turn to our audience here and take any audience questions.
I'll ask one.
Oh, we have a mic coming.
So I'm thinking of all the teams that are at home right now around the world that we talked about, and they're watching, and I'm thinking if you were in the room with them, Greg, and you were talking to them about where they are in the competition and how to move forward, what thoughts would you have for them to help them move forward in the competition?
Yeah, I'd say, you know, don't when you focused on performance, but don't forget safety and don't forget reliability as you're working through your design, because those are going to be very important aspects of this. We don't have a, you know, this is a hard problem. So we don't have a guarantee that we'll end up with a, you know, with somebody that can do it all. And that's what makes this so challenging. If it was as simple as just somebody going out and ordering the right things out of the catalog and putting them together the right way, there wouldn't be as much prize money involved. But this is a no kidding hard problem. So it's going to be very interesting. So, you know, the performance requirements are difficult. I would ask them, but don't forget safety, don't forget the reliability aspects of this.
Do we have another question?
So at Boeing a lot we worry about extreme conditions, lightning strikes, very hot, very cold weather. Yep. For the GoFly competition, how strongly should will the entries be graded on for their ability to handle these very non-idealized conditions?
That's a very good question. I think probably not as much initially, but clearly before you got to an operational system, you would need to consider those things. So I think if the participants look at those more extreme conditions, at least to how will their design adapt to
Grow into a
more adverse weather conditions and those type things. That would be an important thing to think about. To demonstrate that capability, it'd be great if you could do it right now, but I think that's probably going beyond what you could do right now, but how you could grow into that, and how would your design adapt for those kinds of conditions would be, I think that would show a level of maturity in the design thinking that would get the judge's attention.
Thank you.
We can take a couple more.
So Greg, I know you mentioned that you recommended teams have someone with an MBA or a similar background, so that way after the competition you can take it to market. Aside from that, or elaborating further on that point, what do you anticipate the next steps for these teams after they submit their design and possibly win?
That's hard to predict, because I think that it'll depend on the designs, and does it look like it's really going to be a capability that you could go to market with? And I think, nature's a stern disciplinarian, so's the marketplace. And I think, there'll be if somebody actually pulls this off and they've got a system that looks like it can go, I would imagine it will draw a lot of interest from a lot of companies. So, that may be, someone else may actually take it to market, but hard to say, That's why the competition is cool, because it's focused on, can you build something like this? And then that's really going to be really hard. It's hard to predict where it might go, but I could imagine a lot of, other companies maybe finding interest in it.
I think we had a question over here. Yeah.
Yes, Greg. The question I had was you touched on the importance of the human in the loop,
Yeah.
and also the testing aspects. And I started to think about, for the participants, for the flying device, how important is it for them to put the device in a simulated environment in order to ensure that they meet the requirements?
Yeah, well, there will be, ultimately, if we have multiple devices that actually fly, we're going to do a fly-off. For us, within our company, having simulation is very critical. So I think, particularly if they've got software in there that helps in the flight controls and things like that, to have those checked out in a simulated environment, so that the first time, if I've got any kind of autopilot in this thing, I'd rather not check that out the first time I get in the air. I'd have check that out on the ground. And fortunately, with the models that exist out there, and a lot of these in the public domain, they should be able to check out a lot of the software that way. And I would encourage them to do that, because getting the hardware to work is going to be hard enough. You'd like to be able to say you've got confidence in the software, and you can do a disciplined build-up of the systems. We always take a building block approach on these things. The Big Bang rarely works on these flying systems. I don't care how big they are. So checking out things as subsystems, and then going to the next higher level of assembly, and then checking that out, and keep building it up at a subsystem at a time, is always a much more disciplined approach. And then when things don't work, it's easier to troubleshoot if you're taking that building block approach. And in that case, in order to check out some of the subsystems, you're going to need to drive them from a simulation as opposed to with real hardware initially, to really check them out.
So if after the competition the participants find that they're really inspired and want to enter the field of aerospace, what advice would you give them on skills that are critical to the future of aerospace to develop while they're still in school?
Boy, I said that, I really almost don't care what your major is. We probably got a job for you, Aerospace is such a great profession because it really does bring together, whether you're a chemist or a chemical engineer, whether you're a mathematician or computer science major, whether you're, mechanical engineer, civil engineer, electrical engineer, whatever you might be, there's some place where your skills can be put to use. So I would always tell students, study what you're passionate about, because that's what gets you through the tough times in school. You got to really love what you're doing. And, but then if you love what you're doing and you also love to work on things that fly and are going to change the world, then this is the perfect place for you. Across our company, we literally have people in, from every major, and there's a critical role they perform to make our systems work because, as I said, to make one of these big systems work, whether it's on the defense side or the commercial side of the company, it requires all of those disciplines coming together. You got to have all the instruments in the symphony for the symphony to sound good, and that's really true. So I'd say study what you're passionate about, and then if you love airplanes, maybe you keep finding aerospace-related projects to get involved in, or if you can have a minor, you fill in your minor courses with things that would be more directly aerospace-related. And like I said, it doesn't have to be just the airplane, it can be the production system and manufacturing as well. I tell people all the time, I said, we invest more in how to build the airplane than the airplane itself. And how you build an airplane is a whole nother level of science required. So, as I said, every, every aspect is important. So study what you're passionate about, fill in your minor with maybe more aerospace specific things, and then call us up when you graduate.
So with that, we're just about out of time, Greg. Thank you for your candor and your thoughtfulness today. If you had to choose one word for GoFly participants to think about as they look toward April 18th, what would that one word be for them?
Well, I'm going to cheat.
Oh.
My hashtag I use is called Change the World. So it's all, no spaces. It's all, so I'm going to count that as one world. But I just, keep the vision that you're going to change the world in this. And because if you're successful, you've got the potential to really change the world.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you to our studio audience here. Thank you to everyone who joined us online. One last reminder before we wrap up on behalf of our friends at GoFly. Again, April 18th is that deadline for the conclusion of Phase 1. Please visit goflyprize.com to sign up, and you can join the thousands of innovators around the world that are going to change the world and really the future of flight. So again, thank you, and ready, set, go fly.